No one will shut up about how addicting Balatro is. It's one of the core selling points of the game. Every run makes the player hungry, ravenous for another. Balatro is the Oreo cookie of video games, cause you're just gonna eat just one run, and then you've munched that sleeve like a ticket counter at Chuck E. Cheese. Big games with millions of dollars would bury bodies in New Mexico for that level of engagement. Yet Balatro is out here with no advertising budget, one developer, and it's cranking donuts around every other game in the Walgreens parking lot. So what mechanics, aesthetics, and systems does Balatro use to keep the player hooked? Let's start with an example. You innocently, naively start a run, look for a good hand, and discard until you're able to play something that wins in one go. You collect your reward, are taken to the shop, and decide to open a buffoon pack because you are the clown. You choose between two mid-jokers and move on to the next round. Okay, pause. If you've played Balatro, you've done this hundreds of times. And within that small, less than a minute long loop of gameplay, there have already been 6 hidden tricks that get the player invested. And all of them use something called positive reinforcement. You've probably heard of it before, and if you haven't, I'm sorry about your family life. In video games, positive reinforcement means something different. Think of Balatro as a room the player enters when they start playing. Inside the room, there are different actions the player can do, like opening menus, clicking buttons, and forgetting to check the boss blind. The twist is when the player acts, how the game reacts changes how the player behaves. Let's take out all of the complicated stuff from Balatro and make a really simple example. This room has just one button in it. That means all the player can do in this room is choose whether or not to press the button. If the button does nothing, the player might try pressing it and then stop because nothing happens, unless you're a real button freak. But what if we wanted to get the player to smack that button until their hands fall off? Let's make it so that every time the button is pressed, a dispenser gives the player a piece of candy. Now that player is gonna press that button over and over until their gluttonous whims are satisfied. If you don't know, this is called a Skinner box, and this test was done on real rats and me because we have identical brains. The reward can even be switched around to make it more effective. The player will get sick of candy eventually, but if we give them $1 every time they press the button, they'll be coming back and pressing that button 8 hours a day for the rest of their lives. We could even force them to wear dumb clothes and show up when we want. Wouldn't that just be evil? When an action like the button press is paired with a positive reaction, that's positive reinforcement. Balatro can't give the player candy or money or delicious curds to satisfy my rat hunger, but boy howdy does it still give me that sweet dopamine. Finding the soul has me like a baby hearing the Cocoa Melon theme. Listen to this sound effect. Listen to how it builds up and then releases. It creates just a tiny bit of discomfort in the rise, and then has the harmonies to make the player feel good. It's like going, just kidding. I'm just joshing. Even if a sound is too quick to create tension, it can still have harmony or pull on known sources of satisfaction, like the jingling of coins. Just as there are sounds that make the brain feel good, certain patterns in motion can feel good too. Don't believe me? Someone just had to change their pants. Pretty much everything in Balatro has a little pop to its movement, small accents to the animation. Chips and mulch shake a bit before settling into their positions. Nothing moves robotically, everything has weight to it. It just sort of feels good to look at, and the way certain notes sound good together. Overlapping that poppy motion with sound effects that create and resolve tension creates a subtle reward. It's like a little treat for your brain, for the good little player you are. Even if the player doesn't realize it, that satisfaction is now associated with the action, which makes them want to do it again. So let's take a look at that tiny gameplay loop, but this time I'm gonna point out the positive reinforcement. When a hand is played, each card is scored independently, and scoring has its own little pop and sound to make you feel good as it goes up. Then, one of the most famous bits of design in the game, the fire. Every player gets hot and bothered when the score catches fire. Not only does it let the player know they've already won the round, but the more they go over that score, the bigger and louder the flames get. It encourages playing big hands that score as high as possible. After the player beats the ante, the game could go to the shop, but it doesn't. Instead, it gets a little frisky with it. A pop-up menu counts each individual dollar the player earned that round, giving the player a little head pat for each one. It's like the digital version of fanning a wad of cash. Then the player cashes out, which gives them another hit of those tasty jingling coins. That's two separate instances of positive reinforcement for earning money, which makes sense as most of the game is secretly about managing your cash flow, just like my life for real. Then there's the shop. Packs cost the most money and can give the biggest rewards, so each one needs reinforcement that really smacks the player's gob. The game spends extra time here, playing that sound effect that builds tension and release. The animation charges with energy before bursting open, like a chest in Zelda. No matter how straight garbo the pack is, the player is still positively reinforced to keep opening them. Packs have even more sneaky things manipulating the player, but that's gonna require going deeper. All of this positive reinforcement is constantly influencing the player. It encourages them to play fewer, higher scoring hands. It makes the player feel good about earning lots of money, which I wish I could relate to. And the game really celebrates opening a pack of cards. All of the actions and decisions Balatro is reinforcing aren't random. They're the behaviors that form a solid strategy. Winning the round in fewer hands means earning extra money. Earning extra money means spending it in the shop to increase score. And opening a pack is one of the quickest ways to add a bit of power to a player's build. By positively reinforcing actions that are strategically sound, Balatro subtly manipulates the player, shaping them into the ultimate gambler. By just following what feels good, the player will naturally be guided to make better decisions. Not like my life at all. For real. Just as important as the rewards of positive reinforcement is when the rewards are given. So far, it's been immediate. Sound effects and animations play as soon as the player clicks. Imagine if buttons worked like this. Disgusting. There are moments where Balatro delays rewards though, and those delays are the secret to how Balatro keeps the player hooked on doing just one more run. Let's go back to our room with the button and the candy dispenser. Right now, this room conditions the player to press the button until they have as much candy as they want. I'd press it forever because I go rat mode, but most people would eventually stop. But what if we wanted to be evil? Let's make the player press the button constantly. We can make the amount of presses needed to get a candy random. Now the player will press the button, waiting in anticipation for a candy, unsure of when, until there, a rising tension broken by a reward. We now have this player's soul. We've changed the system to make the player press the button way more by changing when we give a reward. When and how the reward is given can be called a reward schedule. These reward schedules, especially the random ones, are everywhere in Balatro. Every time the player opens a pack, there's a tension to whether or not the cards inside will be trash. Because they're random, this creates a small randomized reward schedule that gets players excited every time, even though most packs suck. This applies to any randomized container, like loot boxes, card packs, or women. Balatro's packs also double as a gameplay balancing feature, as the randomization is what gives the game its difficulty, strategy, and ability to ruin my night. Early in a run, the contents of a booster pack aren't immediately good or bad. Instead, the player has to compare the cards and decide which one is the most ticklish to their fancy. This is the reason every time the player starts a run, the shop will contain a buffoon pack, and the player will have enough money to buy it, and encourages them to form a strategy around the cards they're given, rather than searching for specific cards and ignoring the rest. There's another more sneaky reason for giving the player a buffoon pack so early though. Once again, imagine our room with the button. What happens when we turn the dispenser off, but we don't tell the player? Well, for one, we descend to a new low. The player will keep pressing the button for quite a while, thinking that candy will eventually show up. Of course, all people can be crushed, and and soon they'll just give up. What we learn is that when the reward schedule is random, we can change the odds of a reward without the player noticing. So instead of turning off the dispenser, let's just make it less and less likely over time that they'll get a candy. Now the player will continue to press the button, but as time goes on, they'll have to press more and more for each piece. We have tricked them into the most classic of blunders. This keeps the player performing the action while reducing the amount of rewards they need to keep the cycle going. Let's go back to Balatro. Once the player obtains a joker, it changes how they view everything in the shop. Every card's effect has to be compared to the joker the player already has. If the player has a joker that only works when a flush is played, now cards that make flushes powerful become better, and cards that don't work with flushes become things to talk about in therapy. Jokers force the player to look for cards that work well with them. As the player obtains more jokers, this gets harder to do. Maybe they have to play flushes of a specific suit, or they need to play flushes that have a lot of face cards. As conditions pile up, less cards that appear in the shop will be useful. But of course, the rising score requirements push the player to keep getting jokers. Naturally, over the course of a run, the reward schedule of shops and packs slowly decreases as joker requirements get more specific. If you've ever been far into a run and just sat re-rolling the shop over a dozen times, you've been had! And yet you kept re-rolling that shop, just like a player in a room would be pressing the button until a candy appeared. Balatro has got you performing this action over and over, even though the chance of a reward has become tiny. This trick isn't just in the shop and packs, it's baked into the design of everything. To address how reward schedules affect Balatro, we have to start looking at how the overall game is structured. Why is the player trying to get to Ante 8 and win in the first place? Why do I get out of bed despite it all? The answer is the same: boredom. Let's think about that for a second. The player tries to complete goals simply because they exist. Nothing shows this better than the collection. Pages on pages of little goals to complete, plus a percentage tied to getting neurotic about it. While beating Ante 8 is a big accomplishment for a new player, completing the collection is the overarching goal for most of the game. Losses and wins exist on their own random reward schedule, but the collection provides smaller, constant rewards for new players to give positive reinforcement for soldiering on. After every devastating loss, the game gives you a little treat, so you can pick yourself up and forget to read the boss blind again. As the player encounters more and more cards in the game, it becomes less likely that the cards in the shop are new. The collection's reward schedule slowly becomes less likely to give a reward over time, turning from nearly constant to the randomized one with decreasing odds we've been talking about. The game is love bombing you, like a true girl boss. The collection doesn't just exist to be a passive system of rewards, though. It also actively makes the player stronger. Many of the strongest and most uriable jokers in the game are locked behind requirements in the collection. As the player spends more time in the game, the pool of available cards grows and becomes stronger. This increases the chance that they'll win. It's a subtle way of tricking the player into thinking their skill has drastically increased, when in reality they just have much better options. Gatekeeping and gaslighting, if you will. This pushes the player toward winning their first run. By then, they've begun unlocking decks, which are likely the last thing they'll unlock. This is when Balatro changes what it's clicker training the player to do. After the first 5 decks are unlocked, the game locks new ones behind winning a run with a specific deck. This is a new action that the player hasn't been positively reinforced to do. Up until now, most systems in the game revolved around the collection, but near the end of completing it, the game is shifting focus. The last 5 decks in the game do this again, rewarding winning on higher difficulties, except purple, because adding any more decks to the game would drive a man to insanity. By placing the decks within the collection, Balatro is doing something quite subtle. The player has likely put a dozen hours into the game, and their collection is very close to being finished. But these last few items, locked behind different decks and difficulties, push the player outside of their comfort zone into the harder bits of the game. That's the power of being slightly annoying. At the same time, the player will notice that difficulty levels are assorted by deck. If you unlock a new difficulty on red deck, it doesn't unlock on any other. Seeing this, it will slowly dawn on the player that their soul belongs to Jimbo. Beyond the collection lies a new goal, beating every difficulty with every deck. Why is being good at gambling so hard? By completing the collection, the game has required the player to start this process already. By adding rewards, it has positively reinforced beating every difficulty with every deck. While one long-term goal nears the end, the game has seamlessly introduced a new one to jangle in front of the player to keep them paying attention. Not every player will do it, of course, but the chances are much greater. This is the part of Balatro I have not completed, although I have been chipping away at black deck because I crave punishment. Doing this only rewards the player with an achievement, Completionist Plus. But for those who are truly compelled to do absolutely everything, there is a final challenge. I'm talking about the Joker stickers. When the player wins a run, every Joker they were using gets a sticker for doing such a good job. These stickers are replaced on higher difficulties, so the only one that matters is gold. This means the player is expected to use every Joker, regardless of power, in the highest difficulty and win. Assuming the player does this with all new Jokers every time, that's 30 wins. Doing it that fast is impossible though, because some Jokers are just bad, and even if the player wants to use them, it's still up to random chance to find them. I can't be clear enough. This is extraordinarily tedious. The game has completely stopped positive reinforcement for anything except patience. I'm up in the balala, straight up refreshing it, and by it, let's just say, my shop. Balatro has run out of new stuff, and so for its final hours, it decides to recycle literally everything. I don't hate Completionist Plus for existing. It's there for the freaks who want it. The people who are so intrinsically driven by checklists and enjoy the loop so much that playing for hundreds of hours doesn't feel like purgatory. At the same time though, I can't help but feel that this level of obsession with content, to the point of recycling every Joker in the game into a long, drawn-out hard mode, is poor design. It goes directly against play patterns that Balatro teaches while completing the collection. Look at what the player has to do to beat all the stakes. Getting less money per round makes the player focus on economy. Increasing score requirements forces the player to scale their score faster. Blue stake teaches the player that nothing is sacred. Eternal imperishable stickers force the player to weigh an additional time-based mechanic against a Joker's base utility. Rental stickers make the player weigh Joker's benefits against money. These are all things the player has to do already, but made stricter to push them to play more skillfully. That all goes out the window once the stickers become involved though. At least with the decks, most change the game enough to make the player change their strategy. Skipping might become more powerful, different cards may alter what hands are easiest, or black deck, which changes my strategy to uninstalling the game. These meaningfully influence decisions the player makes. Stickers though, do not. Gold stake is designed to make the player master managing random chance. The problem is, by making the player look for specific Jokers, the game becomes tedious rather than strategically complex. Plus, gold stake is the most random that Balatro gets, which just makes the problem so much worse. Getting every sticker is directly opposed to the random element of the game, where during the collection a few items could become mildly frustrating to track down. Completionist Plus makes that frustration the entire challenge. Beating gold stake takes skill. Getting Completionist Plus takes time. These final two achievements lose what made Balatro fun in the first place. Even with beating every difficulty with every deck, climbing through the easier stakes becomes frustrating when the player knows they could beat gold. The game knows these achievements are kind of bad. They don't unlock any new content, the only reward is street cred on Reddit, which is worse than nothing. Yet their existence pads the game's runtime so absurdly that they cheapen it for me. It made me look back all the way to finishing the collection and made me ask, how much of this game did I play because I actually wanted to? How much of it did I play because the game made me feel like I needed to? Plenty of the positive reinforcement in the game serves to teach the player how to master it and have fun. I think that's That's a fine and dandy way to do things. The reward schedules, though, that's where I take issue. Playing around random chance and using literally everything are fundamentally opposed to one another. The core strength of roguelikes is learning the principles of the game rather than rote memorization. By making the player get everything in the game, it turns the random chance into the room we imagined earlier. The player just pushes a button until they get their delectable cheese. But the twist is that the rat is lactose intolerant. This metaphor is falling apart. The completionist aspect of Balatro has really soured my feelings on the game over time. I don't mind playing it, I find the strategy fun and engaging. Believe me, games can be a lot more aggressive about a lot worse things, but even on this level, I'm not a fan. Understanding how its systems manipulate the player has helped me to see those patterns in other places, and I hope it helps you be more aware of when you're doing something because of conditioning instead of actually wanting to do it. On that note, subscribe and I'll let you open this mystery box. Did you do it? Okay, let's see what you get.
Scrap it!
Yo! That's an S++ rank, let's go!